True, everything that's been said for us from an internal perspective. What is also an element here is that we add value to clients' organizations. That is our role. That's our job. We have that responsibility, and as such, we have an obligation to ensure that our teams are capable and competent to deliver that to our clients, which is one of the other main reasons why we are doing this training, so that this group here, who has been invited to the training, learns that competency and skill level and understanding, and B, is able to pass that knowledge along to their teams that are the ones who are servicing our clients and servicing our associates on assignment.
Yeah, so it's really hard to add value to a client if we're not adding value to our own people. I mean, how do you go out and share that if your attitude's terrible, or you don't have the training, or you don't understand that? So we have to add value to our own people, which is really, a major part of that quote. So thank you, Belinda. That was good. All right. Well, today we are going to continue on from last week. I know that we're still a fair amount of information that Kyle and Joe were still sharing in regards to pay and promotion, chapter 22. And then we'll, what time is remaining, we'll turn over to Belinda to start her piece for the next couple of weeks. So I will, Joe and Kyle, I know you guys have worked on this, so I'm not sure who's taking the first stab at it. Kyle, are you? Okay, take it away, Kyle.
Okay, guys. Well, we had a great discussion about pay and went through a lot of principles last week, and I thought in the discussion it covered a lot of what I had planned for this, and this is a long and pay is tricky, and there's multiple types of pay. There's salary that is paid on a regular interval. It's an expectation, doesn't really motivate. It's just a factor that keeps our dissatisfaction keeps satisfaction in the job up, but doesn't really add motivation to a job. There's incentive pay, which comes as a part of performance, not always paid as part of regular salary, and that is a form of feedback, which can be motivating. We also wanted to cover promotion and evaluation a little bit in this section as well. What should a performance evaluation look like, and what should it measure? Any thoughts on performance evaluations really quickly?
I think the obvious is performance. It should certainly measure performance, right, Kyle? I'm trying to warm the group up a little bit. Let's call on someone for that one.
What should that look like, Bill?
That's a great question. Yeah. So let's call on some folks and get them warmed up.
I'll speak up, Bill. Right. You know me.
I do know you, Jason. That's great. Thank you. What should be measured?
No, performance evaluation, it should be a review of your goals. Number one, it should look, you probably set some goals with each other, and you should review those goals and see if you're hitting those goals, and then reset new goals. Also, you should be looking at, your numbers, obviously, especially in the sales world. Are you hitting those certain metrics? The KPIs is what we call them. And then also, you should also look at how they're doing personally. Whether they're happy. Is there anything else you can do as a manager? What can you do better? Those types of things. That's what I think a performance review looks like.
I love it. You really hit on the points. We should be looking at employees' achievements, skills, contributions to the organization, metrics, KPIs, how that affects financial or how it supports others. And it's got to be objective as well. It's got to be very transparent and objective. Annually or semi-annually, you can have a more formal performance evaluation, but we really should be evaluating performance constantly in weekly or bi-weekly one-to-one discussions.
Kyle, I think Kyle too, we have systems in place, processes like the PAT, for example, that measures every day, right? I mean, you get in and you can put your information, you can say, here's what I've done. We have our weekly KPI form that the salespeople fill out, so that every Monday, we can add those to to the sheet, and we're measuring those KPIs against what our what our actual should be, what we're striving for, and what our standards are. So really, performance reviews are happening continuously, and then you add the one-to-ones on there. By the time you get to a formal quarterly review or yearly or half-year review, you've done lots and lots of reviews every week.
Yeah, I think another thing is to set people up for success by having clear criteria. It should be transparent, measurable, and relevant right from the get-go, so that people are very clear on what they need to do. Establish standards of performance early on, right from the get-go, so that there is something to measure from. Right, early on, you want to set a baseline, and then you want to improve on those standards. Right. There are a lot of legal cases that have come against companies for performance evaluation, believe it or not. The Lilly Ledbetter case that created the Lilly Ledbetter Act of 2009, for example, was one regarding pay. And Equal Pay Act 1963. So within pay and performance, there has been a lot of discrimination cases. What mistakes could we make, and probably do make, as most companies do, that could get us in trouble when it comes to performance reviews and being fair with employees? Any thoughts on pitfalls we may run into? And then I'm going to go into a bunch of them. Maddie, any ideas on a pitfall that managers could fall into as we evaluate?
Yeah, when I do my one-on-ones with my team, we have the weekly one-on-ones, but we don't do a formal performance review, which me and Bree have been talking about changing. But just the lack of documentation is probably something my team's struggling on, is we have the conversations, we talk through the things, but there's no documentation of it. So on the legal side, that could definitely be a bad thing.
Absolutely. That if it wasn't documented, it didn't happen. We've all heard that, right?
Right.
So some common mistakes that managers make in the evaluation process are lack of specificity. We hear this a lot in our company. Specificity is super important. If we're vague and just kind of provide general feedback without giving specifics, we're not moving the needle in evaluating employees. Who knows what recency bias is? This is when we have a tendency to only look at the most recent history of the performance of that employee without looking at the whole performance. So if we're evaluating a period of time, a quarter or a year, we should look at that entire quarter, or that entire year, and not just what they've done in the past couple weeks. They could suddenly ramp it up right before their evaluation, and then suddenly the evaluation is good rather than through that evaluation period. A lot of managers fall into this. Lately, you've been doing awesome, so therefore you've always been doing awesome, right? Leniency or strictness bias. Who knows what halo or horn effect is?
Sounds fun.
Halo effect is when there's one thing that just causes you to think the universe about that person. There's that one thing that person does well, or that one personality trait that you like in that person, and therefore they can do no wrong. Horn effect is the opposite. There's that one thing that you dislike about that individual, and therefore they can do nothing right. So these are little biases that we have to be careful of as managers. We have to look at the whole person, and when we have clear and measurable objectives, then it's a lot easier to be clear and look at those factors rather than other things that can kind of creep into the process. Central tendency bias, just kind of averaging everything all the time. This is oftentimes when you have indecisive managers that can't determine whether a person's doing well or poor. Once again, if you don't have a real objective measurement in place, it's easy to just kind of go the easy road and kind of give everyone an average score, right? Personal bias, this is where you just have unconscious biases about a person. They may not be similar to you, or they may be similar to you. Lack of performance metrics, evaluating employees without clear, measurable performance metrics. This is a real big pitfall. We haven't set that up. How do we know whether or not they are making a difference? Ignoring development and growth. This is a big problem too. Solely focusing on performance without focusing on improving that individual's performance is another one. Maddie said the next one, failure to document, not documenting performance, achievements, feedback can lead to inaccurate, incomplete assessment of a person. And you just don't know. What if they got fired and you don't have any documentation on where they were in the performance? They turn around and put a discrimination claim on you. You're not in a good position as a company. Lack of employee input. This should not just be a one-way discussion. Managers oftentimes dominate that discussion, and as leaders and managers, we need to listen and get on the same page as the employees too. They too must have a place to give input. I think another one is just poor communication, and I think a lot of these kind of contribute to that: lack of documentation, lack of specificity, and we can become frustrated with an employee for not performing. But is it because we haven't made it clear in the beginning? And the last one I have on here is contrast error. This is comparing your performance with other employees rather than against objective criteria. We have a tendency to compare people. Just it's kind of a natural thing that we do. It means that we may not have an accurate view of that person. If we've set up very clear objectives with that person, we should just be comparing their performance against those objectives and not how they did compared to other people. This is also an error in the interview process too, the contrast error. Joe, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just a fun extra comment too. Well, we can make that biases. Guess what? The other side of the table makes it all the time too, right? Is the employee that we may be doing this is like, well, that person did this and this. Why is that? Why is what I perceive that they have isn't something that I have? And I mean, we've never experienced that in our family units, right? With our siblings or with our even our kids, where it's like, but they got that, right? It's funny because you know, it's not everything is always going to be perfectly equal. Not everyone is where someone else is. And so it's the biases isn't just on our side. It can also be and is likely also on the employee side too.
100%. We've all fallen into these things. We may not even know we've fallen into these things. And the important thing is to really, I would recommend looking up cognitive biases. There's a Wikipedia has a massive list of them. Become familiar with these and self-evaluate on them. We probably can't fully eliminate bias, but we can certainly improve it, and we can certainly be aware of it before we go into an evaluation situation. And I'm going to turn the time over to Joe now for his part. Thanks, everybody.
That was awesome, Kyle. Extra thanks for you going through some of those extra components. A lot of things to think about in these reviews. So one of the things I wrote down as you were talking, Kyle, is the key to good pay conversations is all about strong performance-based one-on-ones before people are bringing up pay. Because if you are having consistent reviews with people on how they're doing, that should be what a coach is doing. Not only does that keep us out of hot water, especially if you're documenting these things, right? Where are you at based off of where you want to be at? You have this amazing opportunity to coach them to be where they want, and you're on the same side of the table as them versus on other sides of the table, which I think is part of the spirit of this conversation that says, how do we stop having conversations where someone comes to us and says, I demand a pay raise, and we don't feel like that they've earned it? I think that's part of this conversation. And so that's the first thing is like, so let's have some fun with this. Maybe let's have some ideas on what's the wrong way. Ooh, Shane, I know Shane's always got great ideas on the wrong way to do. No, I'm just teasing with you. But Shane, why don't you go first? And then let's do a little bit of, let's talk about some things that we should be doing or maybe shouldn't be doing for a little bit of fun. Go ahead, Shane.
There's a right and a wrong way to ask for a pay rate increase. The wrong way is just to show up and say, I've been here for this long, I need an increase, right? You're really not showing value. Now, hopefully your performance and everything else has shown that value, but it's very different when you go in and you sit down with your manager and you highlight the things that you've accomplished, the above and beyond that you've had, the things that you've done in addition, right, that weren't necessarily asked of you to do, that aren't in your general job description. Is those type of things that I've used in the past when I needed a raise. So here's a good example. I was delivering meat for a company in Ogden. I drove a big box van. I made $8 an hour. All I wanted was a 50-cent an hour raise. And so I went in, and instead of saying, hey, I need a raise or I quit, it was, I went over my route. I went over my time frame that I delivered meat. I went over mistakes that were made. I kind of went over everything and how I had advanced. And when it was all said and done, right, the owner of the company ended up looking at it all and gave me $1 an hour raise. So it's really just how you approach it.
So, man, Shane, you're always ahead of me one, right? So this is great. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is two schools of thoughts, right? There is the time economy, and then there's the results economy. Has anyone ever been in the time economy where it's like what we're doing is we're trading our time for money, and that's how we perceive the world? Where we want to get ourselves to and where we want to get our employees to is to the results economy. And the results economy is what value am I providing above and beyond my compensation? And then you have all of the tools in the world to go in and say, it's like, this is the value that I'm providing. But there's more to the equation than just am I providing more value? It's a bigger picture. It's a bigger scope. And every single one of us has a component of that scope in every different capacity, right? So something interesting to think about, right? Is your employees thinking in the time economy, right? Or are they thinking in the results economy? And when you can help them through coaching in one-on-ones based off of your performance and all of the things that Kyle just went through, this is an opportunity to help coach our team members on how to get their mindset to a results economy mindset, that they're providing more value than they're taking. Carrie, hit it.
Yeah. So again, it goes back to these processes. It goes back to clear objectives. So
I have clear objections usually too, Carrie. So.
clear objections as well. So I think when we have those processes in place, when we're very specific about what we do, and in our documents, it clearly states that we're not basing things on time. It's not about tenure. It's about, what your performance and what your value is that you bring to the table. And again, for a person, if you have a PAT, if you have some of these other systems in place, we have scorecard for our salespeople. If you're using those, then it makes it much easier to show your performance. It makes it easier to talk about it, and then it's just a much better way, because now we're focused on again, it's not about how much time I've been here. It's about how much I've done in relationship to the objectives or the outcomes that we've laid out.
Yeah, the exactly how we need to do this. And I want you to be very clear that the conversation about pay is different than the coaching conversations about performance, right? Once you start completely meddling these things together, it gets a little bit tricky, because it's like, well, there's that. You need more pay. If you haven't done a good job when it comes to performance, it is going to nip you in the bud later. So let's have some fun. One thing I'm going to mention is that Belinda's has a couple-week training we're going to be going into that is all about the mindset of the results economy. All about how do we focus on managing your business by the numbers. And she can give us some great tools and tips and tricks on this. And so I want you to know more fun stuff is coming, how to understand these things, how to lead, how to do some of these things by numbers. And obviously it comes with the other components to it. So thank you, Belinda. We're going to have some fun with that conversation. We're not ready for the handoff just yet. I would like to have for the next 10, maybe 15 minutes, just some open dialogue about maybe how to do this and how not to do this. So let's have a fun show of hands again. We did this last week. Is anyone in this last week? Oh, Jason, yes, boom. He is on top of it. So Jason has had a conversation about pay in any regard with an employee, or in Jason's account, you could say a client. So I added that extra one so he could keep his hand. No, just has anyone in a 1 week had a conversation about pay with anyone in their business? Yes. Okay. 2 weeks. Okay. 3 weeks. 4 weeks. Okay. 2 months. Ivan, this is where you get to raise your hand, because when you came on board, we had a conversation about pay. So that's that counts, right? So, okay. Let's go 3 months. Oh, you guys are supposed to keep your hands up. It's disappearing on me. I was trying to get to a place where everyone had their hands up. But let's just put it this way. As leaders, this conversation will come up. It will. And if it hasn't come up in the last 3-6 months, all right, you're probably primed for it to come up very soon. And so the point is that this is going to be coming up. And I want to ask a question to the audience. You guys are all going to be my manager. You all may or may not feel like I have earned a pay raise, but I have come to you guys, leader or leaders here. I think that I deserve a pay raise. What's some responses to that? Let's go with bad ones, because that always warms it up a little bit. What's a bad response to that? Any ideas? I'm gonna start calling on folks so we can get this warmed up.
I don't think you do.
Ooh. I don't think you do. That's a bad response. That's a good bad response, right? Okay.
If they
Jane?
laugh, laughing's probably a bad response.
Yeah. That's cute.
I have to check with my superiors.
Oh yes, the whole used car dealership tactic. Yep. let me talk to the manager and I'll get back to you about that. Oof, that's a tough one, right? Great. Those are a couple good ones. Any others? Come on, let's have a little bit of fun with this one. Laughing was a great one, Ashley. That's definitely don't do that one. So I don't think you do. Okay. Let's talk about no other bad ones come to mind. Okay, that's probably good that we don't have more bad ones that easily come to mind. Has anyone had a negative experience in this or even another company, just anywhere in their life, where you've gone and talked to your leader about compensation and it didn't go so well? Shane's got a slow, like serious, like the oh yeah. Okay, I saw Ashley, right? Jason's had it, right? I just seen it in the eyes. It's come up, right? And so the whole point I'm trying to get to is this also creates experience for the employee, right? And so we need to be cognizant and mindful that it also creates the experience for the employee. So what, instead of laughing or saying, I don't think so, what would be great ways to do this? And let's just assume that you haven't, that you may not have been as prepared for that conversation as you'd like, and you still don't feel like that it's there, or the business isn't where it can afford it. Let's talk through that. Kyle.
Yeah, one response I use is I come back with a question and say, tell me what's on your mind. Let's talk about this. And then that
Well, let's
opens
actually
up,
do that real quick. Well,
that
Kyle,
opens
I've
up
been
the
here for a
conversation
year.
for what's the justification essentially?
Yeah. So Kyle, I've been here for a year, and I worked really hard, and I think I should get a pay increase.
Well, let's get into the specifics of your work.
And
Tell me more.
Do you see how tricky this stuff is, guys? Right? It's like all of a sudden it's just like, well, I mean, can you deny that they haven't been working hard? Can you deny those things? Like, no, they have been working hard. And so this is where all of the prep work makes it so much easier, is when you have had performance-based conversations. And so, so let's talk through this just a little bit. It says, okay, so yes, it's so true. You are right. So rather than saying things like, I know, say things like, you're right, where possible, just talk about this. You're right, you have been here for a year and you have been working really hard. Try not to use the dreaded but next though, okay? And say, let's go back and review where you're at, and let's also have the conversation about where you would like to be and how we can help you, or how I can help you to get there. Go ahead, Carrie.
So just like sales, and some of you have not necessarily been directly in sales, but you're all salespeople, just to let you know. If you prepare for discussions with a prospect or a client, you're doing the same thing. When you know certain things are going to be asked, then you should know how to be prepared for those. And the best way to be prepared for those is to ask great questions. Okay.
That's exactly right.
Don't start pitching. Whether when somebody comes and talks to you about what you just said, don't start pitching, which is what people will do. What you need to do is ask questions, ask great questions. And as you ask questions, it opens up. It also shows that you're listening, that you're concerned, and that it's not just a blow off. So ask great questions and don't pitch until you've finished the questions. Then you can start, going into other details, but don't pitch yet.
So one of the fatal mistakes we could make in this scenario is start backpedaling, or start justifying why that they haven't earned it. Most of the time, these individuals that we lead need, not most of the time, all of the time, they need to be heard. They need to be heard first. And the best way you can hear your employees is exactly what Carrie said. Ask them questions. So I don't have anything overly prepared when it comes to, these would be great questions to ask, but let's have some open dialogue about great questions. I need to get some participation in this group just going just a little bit. So this is a tough one, and good, bad, or ugly, it's okay. There's no wrong answers here. We're all peers and we're all going to be working this out together. Okay. So I'm going to call on Bree. I'm going to call on Ivan. I'm going to call on Techie. And any three of you that have, what would be one question that if someone came to you and said, hey, I feel like I'm due for a pay increase, what would be a question? It doesn't have to be good. Let's just give it a try. So Ivan, Techie, or Bree, who'd like to go first on a question?
I can do that.
Thanks, Bree.
So I think a good question would be probably what expectations, or I would probably pull up our expectation sheet, like what we have for that job, and see where they have hit the expectations. I don't know if it'd be necessarily a question, but show me where we have hit the expectations, where we've gone above and beyond. And one thing I was going to add to the previous part was, if I felt like they weren't quite there for a raise, I would give them suggestions or a list of what I feel like needs to happen before we move forward with that raise as well. So
that's good. So let's form that into a question. And this probably wouldn't be your first question that you'd ask. But it is, I think it would be a good one to say, would it be okay if we reviewed the performance and where you are at? Might not be a bad question to kind of tee that off. What do you think, Bree? Is that good?
That's really good.
Okay.
Yep.
Sounds good. But that's an excellent point, which is now we have one thing that I really like what Bree said is she has an expectation list for the role that person's in already. And that should have and likely already has been reviewed pretty significantly. And so that is an opportunity to go back in there with that, which is interesting. Okay. Go ahead, Kyle, and then I want to get to Ivan or Techie for one question that they can ask that might help bring more information to light. Go ahead, Kyle.
I think for a good first question would be, tell me what you're thinking. And then see what they're thinking and why they're bringing this issue in the first place. And then you may hear their justification in that as they talk about it, and then we listen through that. That can lead to getting back to their job description and their expectations and metrics that we have all set up nice and perfectly, right, guys? And and if they're hitting those things, and if the company's in a position to do that, then I think there's justification there. If the justification's not there yet, then I think it's a discussion on how do we get there.
Yeah, that is great, right? Which is, let's focus on trying to get them to tell us more why. And I'm going to tell you guys this. So Ivan, Techie, I've got a question bubbling in my head, but I'm going to share one anyway. So whichever two of you want to jump on it first, you can say, oh, that's what I was going to offer, right? But the question that I had, I'm teasing with you guys a little bit. Question that I had is, can you tell me more what's on your mind or what's going on? Tell me a little bit more about that. That I saw Ivan's like, yes, that's where. No, I'm just teasing with you. But go ahead. You came off mute, Ivan. I want to hear it.
So I was gonna say I would try to at first hit it more on a personal level.
Yeah.
To try to find out, and then move over to a business one-on-one. Let's review everything. Let's see, because that, in my opinion, when you hit the first one-on-one, you kind of know how to direct the conversation and how to go from there. But you definitely want to give your team member or your employee the opportunity to kind of voice on what's going on, you know, in their mind and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, and I love the mindset, which is this is very personal to them, right? I mean, they're talking about being able to provide more for their financial scenario and situation. And I can tell you, this is one of the most crucial conversations that wasn't likely easy for them to bring up. And for a lot of people, it's not. Some people, they're not abashed about that, and they ask often and frequent, right? But most I've experienced are very hesitant to bring this up, and so getting on a personal level, like Ivan's talking about, is great. Techie, hit it.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like along what Bree and some of the things that Ivan and Kyle was saying, and you as well, was yeah, let's review where we're at, and let's review our compensation policies, and let's find out what they're thinking, and ideally love to review if it's part of that conversation and seeing what business growth that we've achieved in the last year or so to be able to offer a raise based on profitability and growth. So
Yep.
things like
Techie's
that.
kind of Techie's in the right track here, because it's the where I would put what Techie said is we've gone through their performance, and then we can talk through, if there is policy around that, but more importantly, we can also talk through where is the business at and what we need to do to impact the business to get it to where it is, where it needs to be, so that we can, have the only way we have more to share is to create more to share. And I think that's exactly where Techie is heading with, which is, again, getting them refocused on the results economy. Did I hit that right, Techie, for you? Or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that's
exactly
about where you're heading.
Yeah, you can't give anything that's not there. So
that's right.
Sure.
Yep. And that's unfortunately the nature of the world that we live in, right? Which is, we need to be very focused on providing that value. And so we have more to share, which is great. Okay. Kyle.
I think it's also just a great opportunity to have a business impact type of discussion.
Yep.
A lot of times what's in someone's head is working hard, maybe doing things that are hard, and maybe there's hard work, but is it the right work? We need to kind of figure that out. Activity versus productivity type of stuff. Some people work really hard, but not very smart all the time. And so I think it's important to have this business impact discussion too, mashed into this subject. And the things we'll be learning from Belinda is this very thing. And I think this is also a great way to get started with teams, and is how do they make business impact, and what they do, how does that affect the income statement? How does that affect, right? So I think if we get off to the right start with this, it's likely that they will come to you with a very good justification. If we're not off to the right start with this, they may be talking about all their busy work and their activity, but it's not always the smart work. So I think it's really important to get just started properly on this, so that with business impact, so that that education's kind of very clear in their minds in the beginning. If not, then it's a great time to start when these conversations come up.
So before I forget, and Jason and Carrie, we're going to get right to your guys' comments. I want to encourage you guys to read chapter 21, which is the one right before the one we just did on pay and promotion, which is about the 5 coaching conversations that you should have before you go into pay and promotion. And you should be having those frequently and consistently. So go review those chapters. It would be very helpful. And so let's go to Jason and then Carrie.
Yeah, I think, you talk about the time or tenure pay raise or whatever. That's a thing of the past. I think we have to set really clear expectations up front that this is based on results. If you want time and tenure, then go to a factory, go to a mill. I mean, I think of that old cartoon of of Bill and Bob. They're sitting there with their lunch boxes and they're punching a time card. I mean, that's back in the or whatever 40s, 50s, 60s or whatever. That's when everybody worked in a factory or a mill or whatever. But as long as we're clear up front that, hey, this is a results industry and we have clear expectations and then we set those, then I think we'll be okay.
Thanks, Jason. Great extra comment. Carrie, go ahead.
Sorry, I was muted. I'm just going to reiterate the fact that we need to be putting these questions down. We need to have something in line, because I'm telling you, just like, I mean, I have trained hundreds of salespeople, and the worst thing that most salespeople can do, they are terrible at asking questions. Terrible. And so if you don't have them written down, if you don't have something in your mind that you can go through, you're going to fail and you're gonna upset somebody. And so you really should, and if we need to as a group or whatever, have a list of questions on how to handle this type of approach, and just really start digging into, again, because you will start pitching and you'll make a mistake if you don't have these questions down. You've got to be trained on, what kind of questions to ask and how to ask them. Or otherwise you fail. And we have some great questions, and we should be going through Q12 quite frequently. That's going to help us with our discussion. If we're having PATs, that's going to help us with our discussion. Our one-to-ones are going to help. This should be no surprise when somebody comes up, if you're going through all these things, both for them and for you. So, whoops.
That's wonderful extra comments too. It's exactly right. Reminding us about the Q12. Thank you. And it's interesting. I want to hit two last points and then go from there. But most employees want some sort of incentive pay. And they said to the tune of at least 2/3 consistently say that that's something. People want autonomy and influence over their pay as much as possible. I think in general, people want autonomy and influence. And then the last thing to bring up here is it is our responsibility as an organization and as leaders to make financial well-being part of the way that we think. And with that, I'm going to hand that over to Belinda.
Okay. Let me start by sharing. Okay, wait. I'm going to figure out my buttons. Tell me I have to do the slideshow thing. Okay.
Hit your share. Your page should be already up when you hit share.
Can you see it?
No.
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm checking. All right. Let me just push the share button here. I think it's this one. Okay.
There.
Yes,
there it
now
is.
we see it.
You seeing it? All right.
Yep.
Okay. If somebody can keep eyeballs for me for hands going up, I've got a couple of screens going here, and I'm also reading from notes.
Yeah,
I
we
got
will.
you back on that. And so does Carrie.
Okay, thank you. Oh, wait, now how do I change screen? How do I go to the next slide? Oh, here. Okay, never mind. Got it. I'm in control. All right, so welcome everyone to a guide to effective staffing operations management. And the first question I hear echoing in my head is salespeople going, well, why am I wasting my time on this? This is not me. I'm in sales. Yes, you are. You're quite right. And really, if you don't feel there's value in this information that is going to be shared here in the next couple of weeks, I don't think anyone can reasonably force you to listen. The reason why, excuse me, I feel that you guys should include yourselves is because you're an integral part of the operation, even though your focus is on sales. And what you're selling is what your operations team can do and how they run the operation. So you, in essence, are just as big a part of it, because you can only sell what you can deliver, and you need to understand what your team can deliver so that you can sell it correctly, and also so that you don't sell accounts and get jobs that they can't fill and they can't be successful at. So you also have an obligation to them for their success. So I would like to encourage you all salespeople to take a couple more days of training and listen to this and educate yourself and become better at what you do and become a more competent staffing professional. Okay.
Belinda, if anybody's on this call, nobody's leaving.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay. So we will get into it more next week. Of course, we don't have that much time left today, which is totally fine. It's not a rush. Here, just to let you know what to expect, is the course outline first. And I think we'll probably just get through this today, is the basic principles of business management. The second thing I want to focus on is how do we apply these principles in the staffing operations world. Then I want to take a look at the financial side of things, profit and loss statements, how to understand financials, budgeting, and such. And then finally, managing proactively by KPIs, understanding what the numbers tell us. So I don't know how many of you have seen this diagram ever in your careers. I'm sure you've all heard the words forecasting, planning, controlling, reporting. This is how a business runs, and it doesn't matter what business it is, what industry it's in. This is how it works, and they all have different focuses. So let me ask if anybody can give us a little insight and understanding what forecasting is, and especially the difference between forecasting and planning. Anyone? And I can't see hands up because I got things on my screen. So Carrie or someone, can you call on someone? If there is anyone. Otherwise, pick a
Say your
volunteer.
question one more time, Belinda. Nobody's raised their hand yet.
Can anyone define what forecasting means, what that is?
Maria, Kyle. Maria was first, and Kyle and Techie also would be open to saying something.
Okay, so if I'm not wrong, forecasting means that you sit down with your team and you prep what your numbers will look like for the next year or the next quarter. That's what I think forecasting is. And then planning is that you actually sit down and plan ahead to make sure that your forecast is met. I could be wrong.
You're not wrong. You have just described what planning is. That's what planning is. Who knows the difference between forecasting and planning? Anybody else? And I will not make you suffer anymore.
So Kyle's next.
Kyle.
Forecasting is really an analysis to determine what will business look like over the next period, depending on how far out you're going.
Right.
What does demand look like? What does what the orders look like? And so you're in the present looking forward and making a determination on what business will look like.
Yes, you're right. And let me take you to the next slide, which gives us a little more clarity on it. Forecasting, here's one of many definitions. It's a prediction or a projection of future performance and goals. In other words, what could happen, and it's based on the past results and on what the performance is right now and what the trend is in the industry or in the economy. And it's usually a 3 to 5 year look ahead. So a forecast tends to be something, and is usually something that is at more of the executive and the corporate level, particularly from a financial standpoint. And so those are the guys. That's where Scott and Ted and them live in that very important space, more than the rest of us. The plan is more of the driving the bus thing. It quantifies what we want to have done in the future based on our performance and our expectations, and it's usually anywhere from a daily to an annual look ahead, and it would include your budget for each month and for the quarter and such, your weekly plan as far as how many placements to make and such. And what it really implies is that you're thinking before you're acting. In other words, you're not just it's not just happenstance. You're deciding what you want to get done and what you want to have achieved before the time comes. Does that make sense? So hopefully this helps a little bit to clarify between the two. I'm going to go back to the previous slide here because I want to discuss controlling and reporting. So reporting, we know what that is, obviously, and it's something that we all do at various levels. We report various data at from recruiter level up to corporate, executive level, and it happens anywhere from daily to weekly to monthly, right? And once we have the information, we review it, okay? And then we go back to our plan and we adjust our plan as needed, if needed, see if it's realistic, see if if we're on the right track or not. The important thing for operations in the field is the control element here. So they are involved with, along with senior field, with executives and senior field leaders, they are involved with the planning element. They should be involved. Usually, their input is sought and used in the planning phase of the cycle. But they're very, very, very important and critical in the control element. The control is the field supervisor level, operations manager level, your branch manager level, your account manager level, and it happens on a daily basis. That's where the control lives, is in the daily operation. Now you see there at the bottom, there's a little thing called short interval control. Does anybody know what that might refer to? Any ideas? I can't tell if anyone's got hands up. If not, let me.
No hands.
Huh? No hands. Okay.
We
So
have Kyle with his hand up.
There we
Sorry.
go. We
Okay.
got one.
Kyle? Go ahead.
To me, after planning, and there's an implementation piece that's probably rolled into the control. I'm sure it's you're executing, and I think short interval control is looking at it in shorter sprints of perhaps a week time period or whatever. So you're really looking at a short time period of your execution and keeping on track with the plan, I guess, is the control piece of this implementation.
That is absolutely a spot on 100% answer, because what you don't want to do is wait for the plan period, whether let's just say a week, because that's typically where we live in field operations, is from week to week. You don't want to wait till the end of the week to see whether or not there's been enough activity for the week. You don't want to be reactive. You want to be proactive. So if there isn't enough things, if the activity level is not where it needs to be by Tuesday, and you know your numbers, you know what kind of interview activity is going to result in enough placements, etc., just for an example, then on Tuesday you need to get that thing going. You don't want to wait till Thursday and go, oh gee, golly gee whiz, we're not going to make our numbers this week. Gosh, it's been such a quiet week. Well, what did you do about it? You know, did you know Mondays and Tuesdays should be the busiest days of the week, and if it's deader than a doornail come Tuesday morning, you need to get off your bum, and you need to create the energy and create the activity and create actions that are going to result in better results, so that you have a better chance of achieving the goal, the plan, meeting the plan by the end of the period. Does that make sense? So operations leaders will typically, in our business, their plan will be weekly, and their control should be really daily. And in some instances, depending on what it is, it could even, depending on what the goal is, let's just say you have an order that needs to be filled by tomorrow or something, right? And you've got 10 open positions. That operations leader isn't just going to say, let's say it's for Wednesday and it's now Monday. Okay, well, fill the order for Wednesday and then go away and not ask about it. No, he or she is going to keep coming back to the team as the day progresses. How's it going? How many people have you got so far? How many interviews? How many, people are coming in? How many responses to the ads and so on, so that you can do corrective action before you hit the deadline, and you can meet what the plan was, right? Okay,
So
yes.
Belinda, as you're talking about this, and of course, you've got it set up for the operations thing, but obviously, this works for, doesn't matter what position you're in.
Yes.
The same cycle works for everybody, whether you're in sales and you're planning,
Absolutely.
how many needs audits you're doing for the week,
Yep.
and what's your action plan, and then execution, and then you're going to report. So
Absolutely.
just encourage everybody to make sure that, just apply it to your position.
Yes, most definitely, Carrie. And we do touch on that for sure. Okay, it is 9:30. We can end, or we can go for a little longer. What do you want to do?
I would
we
say
should stick to the time.
Yeah.
and-
Just,
Okay.
We'll,
All right.
we'll
Well, this
continue
was a
on.
good, yeah, I think this was a good sort of introduction for us to get started at next week. And I'm going to unshare if I get my buttons here. Stop sharing.
Go clear to the top.
Is it
There
gone?
you go. There you
Okay.
go. Do you have any thing that we should be prepared for next week?
We may, depending on how the discussion goes. I'm hoping that we will get to the financial. It's my first portion is going to be the financial result area and the KPIs that go with that part. So I would like to ask that if you don't have a copy of your P&L for June, please ask for it. Leaders, please, if you could share, so that I can walk you through what those numbers mean. We will also, I will bring some reports, some operations reports that we can look at. You don't have to worry about that. But if we can get the P&Ls out to everybody here, that'd be fantastic.
Yes. So managers, and then I would suggest too, the salespeople can also be looking at the KPI report that's due every week, and what are those numbers? What are your outcomes supposed to be, so that you know what your KPIs are. So I think that would be, really good to, as we're discussing all of this. So
yeah,
good. Well, thank you, Belinda. It's a good start.
Yep.
So we'll be ready for next week, and everybody just again, one thing as we go through this, please make sure, if you haven't watched all the videos, if you missed one, it's your responsibility to make sure that you've covered everything in this class. So if you've missed something, please go back and watch the video recording of that, so you can be caught up on all of the things. Really important as we go through this training. And as we transition after Belinda, as we get into the leadership, we've just got to make sure that this team, again, part of our culture is we, you're self-accountable and make sure that you're doing your thing. So, all right, have a great Friday. If there's nothing else, we'll end it here. And thanks everybody for being on, and we'll talk to you all next week. Appreciate it. Take care.
Great call.